When I reviewed the Kia e-Niro, I found it to be one of the best all-electric SUVs that money could buy, and you guys also agreed with me. And here we've got the Hyundai Kona Electric. For those who are not aware, Hyundai is the more premium brand over its Kia sibling. So I'll very much be intrigued to see how the Kona Electric compares, and in this review I'll be heavily comparing it to the Kia e-Niro to see if its premium is actually worth your money. Now, if you're interested in knowing the different level trims that you get with the Kona Electric, and furthermore how they compare to the Kia e-Niro, do check out our full written review. It will be down in the description below. Also down there you'll find a link to our Instagram. It's at TotallyEVnet for those who use a social media platform, and we'd very much appreciate a follow. So let's kick things off and talk about the exterior design. And here I think Hyundai have really upped the ante. From the front you've got an aggressive look, and that's namely due to the headlight design. The same could be said around the rear, where the tail lights are also slender. At the side you've got 17-inch alloys that come as standard, although I'm not a fan of the plastic wheel arches in the side skirts. I think it detracts from the premium design of the rest of the vehicle. Very much like the Kia e-Niro, it's the same sort of complaint I had. I just wish that Hyundai had addressed this in their more premium offering to the all-electric market. Now, moving inside the cabin, Hyundai has preserved this bit more premium look and design. It still feels a little bit better over its Kia alternative, from its steering wheel to the dashboard design and even the center console look. Although I do feel it's a little less practical, not to say it's not practical, over the Kia alternative. Here the center console is a singular plastic piece, whilst the Kia e-Niro has a cutaway section, meaning it's just a little easier to reach down and get your valuables, which are placed in the storage compartment found below. Nevertheless, the Hyundai also integrates a USB slot over here and also a 12-volt socket. Now, there's another USB socket found underneath a plastic flap, and over here you'll also find a wireless charging pad where the applicable models apply. The only thing worth bearing in mind over here is that if you were to plug in your smartphone, it would overhang in terms of its USB socket. It doesn't quite fit as flushly as it did, for example, on the Kia e-Niro or indeed in other vehicles out there. Now, on the subject of technology, the Hyundai Kona Electric, very much like the Kia e-Niro, uses Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which can be accessed through its 10.25-inch infotainment display. This also is a 7-inch display on the SE model. We've got the Premium SE over here, which is the kind of top spec model. The only thing worth bearing in mind, and something I did point out in my Kia review as well, is the fact that the Android Auto integration isn't that great, whereby a third of the screen is rendered completely useless. I would have liked Hyundai, or the Hyundai group should I say, to fully utilize the display and therefore have a better experience for Android users. Now, the infotainment display is very comprehensively laid out. It's very bright and also very responsive. I have no issues whatsoever over here. And furthermore, you can tinker around with the vehicle settings, and this will be very much apparent for those people who want to play around with the regenerative braking levels, which I'll get onto in my driving section of this review. But before moving on, I should mention that this vehicle also has an 8-speaker Krell automotive sound system. Now, if you want a dedicated audio review and like more details about how the vehicle sounds, do check out on your pop-up banner or indeed in the description below, where you'll see a written review and indeed the YouTube review of the audio system that's comprised within the Premium SE model. What I will say is, in a nutshell, it's decent, but again, very much like the Kia alternative, it does not really give you the best in terms of vocals, while its bass is very much in your face. Now, on the subject of audio, the Kona Electric has a better insulated cabin over its Kia alternative, and that becomes inherently apparent when you can't hear the external speaker whooshing away. In case you're wondering what that is, that's essentially made to alert pedestrians of your oncoming presence. The system is called VESS. There's a button actually found by the driver's side door which allows you to disable the system, although this will be enabled by default each time you step inside the car, purely because of EU regulation. Now, the point I'm trying to make over here is the fact that the Kona Electric ultimately has just a better interior cabin insulation, at least from my tests, and ultimately means that one of my major complaints of the Kia e-Niro is a non-issue in the Kona Electric, and that's very much a plus point in my books. Now, moving past that, we've got the instrument cluster, and here the instrument cluster is very comprehensively laid out. You can see your remaining charge, you can also see what the mileage you're doing, and indeed, let's say, the power indicator. The thing which I really like about this is that when you were to switch between the driving modes, so let's say eco, normal, and indeed the sport mode, what you'll find is the instrument cluster kind of reflects that sort of mode, therefore tailoring it a little bit to the drive mode that's selected. A small little touch, but one that's very much appreciated. Now, just above the instrument cluster in the premium SE model, what you'll find is a head-up display, and to me this adds a great safety element, because you don't have to glance down at the instrument cluster or let's say the infotainment display while it is perfectly positioned. The head-up display gives you the key amount of information that you need, and therefore allowing you to know, let's say, your route guidance, or indeed the safety systems that are enabled, such as lane keep assist, or furthermore the actual mileage that you're doing in terms of the speed, so therefore not having to glance down at the speedometer on the instrument cluster. It's a small little inclusion, but at this price range it's very much appreciated, and you can see how the Hyundai here stands out in comparison to the Kia alternative. Now, as for the steering wheel, it's got a good size and weight to it. It's also got flappy paddles to adjust the regenerative braking, and you've got media controls and indeed instrument cluster controls which are perfectly laid out. There's no issues over here. As for the center console, you've got 2 cup holder spaces at your disposal, and also a small little storage compartment here to store your valuables. There's also a little part over here where you can put, let's say, loose change. In terms of the buttons, you've got a variety of different ones that are included depending on the spec model that you use, but the biggest thing for me is the physical climate controls, which are just very easily accessible and very much responsive. Now, onto seat comfort, what you'll find is the Kona Electric is pretty much near identical to the Kia e-Niro, whereby the seats are a little bit stiff, so therefore not perfectly ideal for long distance commutes. And in terms of the middle seat at the rear, while it can be used as it's a 5-seat vehicle after all, it is again a little bit stiffer. On the plus side, if you've only got 4 occupants and you've got someone at the rear who wants to use this as an armrest, they can do so, and there's also 2 cup holder spaces. Now, while most aspects of the Kona Electric are positive over the Kia e-Niro and provide a bit more of a premium experience, the same couldn't be said in terms of rear headroom and legroom, which is a little bit more limited over its e-Niro alternative. The same could be said about boot space, where the car has 332 litres with the seats up, and if you pop down the seats, it extends up to 1,114 litres. By comparison, the Kia e-Niro has 451 litres, and with the seats down, that extends up to 1,405 litres. Ultimately, the Kia e-Niro is just a little bit more practical for those people who have larger size families. In terms of headroom and legroom, as I mentioned, the Kona Electric just feels a little bit more crammed in. As someone who's just under 6 foot, legroom feels just a little bit too tight at the back, while headroom isn't too much of an issue, but if I was 6'4", I'd struggle to fit at the back. The same couldn't be said about the Kia e-Niro. Now, on the plus side, in the premium SE model, both front seats are electronically adjustable, which is kind of what sets itself apart from the Kia e-Niro 404 Plus. In this respect, you won't have any issues sitting at the front. Headroom and legroom are plentiful, and if you're someone who's tall, again, you won't have any problems at the front of the cabin. As I mentioned, it's really at the rear where things become a little bit more crammed in. Now, elsewhere, in terms of convenience and practicality, what I will say it's very much the same complaint that I had with the Kia e-Niro, is that there's no USB slots that can be used at the back of the cabin. And unlike the Kia e-Niro, which had a USB plug found in the center console compartment storage space, and therefore allowing you to drag a cable if you wish to do that, that's not the case with the Kona Electric, so therefore you'll have to rely on power banks. On the plus side, the storage that you find on the doors, in other words the front doors and the rear doors, are very much plentiful. At the rear you can fit, let's say, large size valuables, whilst at the front you can also fit a 500ml bottle with ease. And now we get on to driving, and first off I want to touch upon the comfort of the car. As I mentioned before about the seats being a bit stiff, but the actual steering wheel itself is extremely easy to maneuver, and given its size and the suspension of the car, it makes for very light work. Now, in terms of the suspension itself, it sits in between a cross of something that's a little bit stiff and a little bit soft, whereby you do suffer from a little bit of body roll when you're going at speed on country roads. However, if you're going over potholes and speed bumps, you're not going to feel them as much as, let's say, the MG ZS EV, which has just a bit more of a stiffer suspension, and equally it's not as soft or as floaty as, let's say, the Audi e-tron. Now, when it comes to performance, the Kona Electric has a single front mounted motor which dispatches 150 kilowatts of power. In reality, its 0 to 60 time sits at 7.19 seconds, at least tested by me with the V-Box Sport. And given it's an all-electric powertrain, you've got 395 Newton meters of torque that's readily available. Now on that note, the accelerator pedal is very responsive, specifically when you're in sport mode. If you were to pop it into eco or comfort mode, what you'll find is the accelerator pedal becomes a little bit softer and therefore just doesn't give you that instant amount of torque when you want it, because it's trying to conserve a bit more energy. In this respect, it also does affect the steering wheel, whereby in comfort and eco mode, the steering wheel becomes a bit softer and a little bit easier to maneuver in inner city drives, while in sport mode it feels like it stiffens it up a little bit, making it a little bit better for, well, more spirited driving, let's put it that way. Now with that power at your disposal, the car actually struggles for grip, as it's using a front wheel drive system only. It means that when you do put your foot down on the accelerator, you do get a little bit of wheel spin, which is somewhat hilarious when you're on a flat road or straight road like we are right now. But when you are around country roads and going at around speeds, what you'll find is that it struggles for grip. So you'll have to watch out when you're going around corners because, well, you don't want to lead yourself to an accident. Now on the subject of performance, the car has a limited top speed of 104 miles an hour, which will suffice for a lot of people, but just worth bearing in mind if you're on the German Autobahn. Now as we're coming to a standstill over here, what I want to talk about is its battery, and specifically in terms of range. Now Hyundai claim 300 miles on the WLTP cycle, when in my tests I found that it achieves around 240 to 260 miles, and that's in mixed driving conditions. So that's a mix of country roads, motorway driving and inner city commutes, where electric vehicles really do perform well in the latter mode. Now in this respect, this all-electric range is really impressive and is very much on par with the Kia e-Niro. The 64 kilowatt hour battery pack does deliver on its promise, and the heat pump, which is developed by the Hyundai group, does come into fruition. In other words, what this does is that it tries to recoup dissipated heat that comes from the battery pack and feeds it into the climate control, whereby meaning that you are essentially losing less energy when you've got the climate controls running in comparison to vehicles that do not use the system. So for example, the Audi e-tron, the MG ZS EV essentially have a mileage kind of, well, a deficit when you're using the climate. So it's just great to see this development that's been used in the Hyundai Kona Electric, and it's no surprise given that I saw the same thing in the Kia e-Niro. Now aside from its all-electric range, in order for you to recoup energy back into its battery pack, you've got a few levels of regenerative braking methods. Now what I really like about this, and again which sets itself aside from its competitors, is the fact that you can save the regenerative level of braking that you want through the infotainment system. Now you've got those three driving modes that I talked about. You've got the eco, comfort and the sport mode. Now here, if you were to set the regenerative braking level per mode, when you do step inside the vehicle again, and of course you were to lock it and of course unlock it, you'll find that that regenerative braking level has been saved, therefore meaning that you don't have to tailor it to your preference. Of course you can do that using the flappy paddles found on the steering wheel, and it makes for a very intuitive user experience. But I love the fact that Hyundai and indeed Kia have integrated this within the infotainment system and indeed stored it within its memory, meaning that you can get the level of regenerative braking that you want each time you step inside the car. It's such a small point, but something that really does yield itself to a great user experience, specifically if you're using this as your daily commute. The only thing worth bearing in mind is that it defaults to the comfort level. So for example, if you were in eco mode or eco plus mode, or let's say sport mode, when you step inside the car, it will go into its comfort mode, and so whatever regenerative braking level that you chose for comfort mode is what will be reflected when you switch on the car for the first time. Now what I will say is that you do get a somewhat one pedal approach. The only thing is that it's not as harsh as some of its competitors, or even let's say smaller hatchbacks like the BMW i3, which is really harsh. In this respect, it's somewhat of a lightish blend. I actually kind of wish that level 3 regenerative braking was a little harsher and therefore really allowed for a true one pedal approach. Now aside from recouping energy via braking. You can also recoup energy via plugging it in. Of course, it's an electric car. Now, it's got a CSS port and a Type 2 port, and this will of course reflect the amount of charge that you can recoup and the amount of energy that you can draw from a charge point or indeed a wall box. You've got 50 kilowatts of power that you can draw from a wall or indeed the grid, and this is via the CSS port, and therefore gives you an 80% charge in around 75 minutes. If you were to go to the Type 2 port, this will take significantly longer, given that it's a 64 kilowatt hour battery. Expect in excess of 7 hours in order to recoup a 100% charge. Now, when it comes to safety systems, the Kona Electric has a whole bunch of technology built in to try and keep you a little bit safer on the road. The biggest thing for me is the head-up display in the Premium SE model. It essentially keeps your eyes more on the road, and as I mentioned this before, means that you don't have to glance as much to the instrument cluster or indeed the infotainment system, which is just a great addition. Aside from that, you've got cruise control and lane keep assist. The latter system does do an okay job, but it does ping you around for left and right a little bit, and therefore in comparison to, let's say, more premium systems out there, for example from the Audi e-tron, what you find is that the Kona Electric just doesn't do as well of a job in keeping you at the center of the lane. Now, elsewhere you've got front collision assist. In other words, it notifies you if you kept your eyes off the road for some reason and been distracted and someone emergency brakes in front of you, the car will brake for you, which is always handy. It's also got rear cross traffic alert, which essentially means that when you're reversing out of a parking bay and you might have not seen the car will also notify you of this. Blind spot assist for me is also a key point here, because it really does add to the safety when you are on the motorway, meaning that you can sometimes forget in terms of when you're glancing at left and right, and if you don't check over your shoulder, you can also rely on the little sensors which then give you a little notification to say, well, there's someone on your side, be sure to make sure of that. And you can even have audio cues enabled, which even further emphasize the point and keep you a little bit safer on the roads. And so this brings me on to my verdict. What do I make about the Hyundai Kona Electric? Well, quite frankly, as I've been comparing it heavily in this video with the Kia e-Niro, I feel that Hyundai have done exactly what they set out to achieve, essentially providing a little bit more of a premium experience over the Kia e-Niro, from its exterior design to its interior look and feel, to even the head-up display, which provides a little bit of extra safety when you're driving on the road. On the more negative side, it's a bit limited at the rear seats, whereby headroom and legroom feels a little bit more cramped in, and furthermore boot space is, well, a little bit more of a luxury with the Kia e-Niro than it is with the Hyundai Kona Electric. Nevertheless, both cars are still fantastic all-electric SUVs, and as a result, I can't give the Hyundai Kona Electric anything less than TotallyEV's Best Buy award, the same that I awarded to the Kia e-Niro. So I'd be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts about the Hyundai Kona Electric, to see how you feel about this car, and furthermore, if it's actually worth the premium over the Kia e-Niro. Let me know in the comments below. Now, if you did like this video, give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course favourite and share, as it'll always help the channel grow. I've been Chris from TotallyEV. Take care and bye bye.